All right, welcome back to another episode in our series of great debates, great decisions, and great deciders. Now, last week I lied to you. Last week I told you that this was going to be our last time having a great debates about the coronavirus, but I also said that we'll probably revisit the great D's, great debates, great decisions, great deciders of coronavirus when a new and very prevalent Shaila presents itself uh, with regard to the coronavirus and halacha pertaining to it, so we can continue to see the halachic process in real time, the great debates, the great decisions, and the great deciders acting in real time. So it didn't take more than just a few days for that to happen. This coming week, Haba Leila Latova, it should be in a good time. This coming week, what am I saying? Tomorrow, Amir Hashem, is Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. I say Amir Hashem because as the Navi Zachariah says that Som Revi, Som Chamishi, Som Shvi'i, Vitzom Asiri, Yahavchu, L'Sasam L'Simcha L'Moadim, that the four fast days, that of Shva Asar B'Tammuz, Tisha B'Av, Tzom Gedalia, and Asar B'Teves should turn from days of sorrow into joyous days. And Amir Hashem, hopefully tomorrow we'll get a bunch of push notifications coming into our phones from WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, and different text messages coming in that Mashiach has arrived. And Amir Hashem will be able to go. And that we'll also hear that the coronavirus is broken. Okay, great, no issues, fine. Baruch Hashem, Mitzvah Hashem. Okay, we daven for it. By the way, it's just point out. I know I'm making a melitza out of it, but you should just know, by the way, that the brisker of, who we'll get back to later this evening as well, but the brisker of Rav Velvela Soloveitchik is one of the major Gedolei Yisrael. He passed away in the early '60s. He is the son of Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, who was, second to Rosh Yeshiva in the Vlozhin Yeshiva. He, took the command only at the age of 28 years old, I think. He was a very, very young man. He married the granddaughter of the Netziv, or of Talmid Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, and in 1880 he took on the helm as second to the Rosh Yeshiva, as one of the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. And then in 1892, when the Volozhin Yeshiva closed down, and we spent a lot of time talking about that in previous classes, so Reb Chaim Soloveitchik went on to be the Rav of Brisk, and that was why he became known as Reb Chaim Brisker. After he passed away in the early 20th century, so his son, Rav Velvela Soloveitchik, took on the post of being the Av Beis Din in Brisk, even though the Brisk Rav never actually considered himself to be a posek. He would rarely actually be the one that sat in Batei Dinim. He was not. He didn't consider himself to be a rabbinical judge. He paskin shilas, of course. Questions would come up, and he'd address them, but he would rarely sit on a beis din. And that's why he had, great gedolim. Reb Simcha Zelig Riegler was the Av Beis Din of Brisk, during the Brisker Rav's reign there. And unfortunately, Reb Simcha Zelig was killed by the Nazis, and the Brisker Rav escaped. He escaped with his family to go to Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael, he established a yeshiva, and he sat and learned and was really a manhig Yisrael. Him and along with him the Chazon Ish and Rashach. Anyway, so the Brisker Rav, just you should know, pointed out that we daven every single day that at Semach David Avdecha Meher Tatzmiach, that we daven that Mashiach should come, and Yerushalayim Yircha Brachmim Tashuv, that Yerushalayim should be rebuilt, and we daven for Mashiach all the time. Mashiach in our lives is is like, it's a basic tenet of Judaism. It's one of the 13 principles of faith, as the Rambam says, that ani mamin be'emunah shlema, b'bias HaMashiach ani mamin. I believe wholeheartedly that Mashiach will come. No question about it. But the Prishka pointed out that when you look closely at the Rambam doesn't say that we believe Mashiach will come at some point in the future, but rather that the tenet of Judaism, that we believe Mashiach is going to come. That doctrine of tzipita liyeshua, anxiously awaiting the full redemption, the belief is not it's going to happen at some point in the future, but rather Briskerov said the belief is that it's happening now. It will happen right now. Not that I have to wait a long time for it, but that it is going to happen right now. Anyway, but in Mirza Hashem, we will not have to have a fast day tomorrow morning, and we're just waiting to get the notification that we're going to Yerushalayim. But if we do have to fast, so it's a real shaila, it's a real question whether or not one should fast right now. There's an amazing historical piece of Torah, which in and of itself deserves its own great debates dedicated to it. And that is the concern, it could be that some of you have read about it, which was the cholera pandemic. The cholera pandemic presented itself at a few different points in history during the, I think, 18th and early 19th century. Could be that the medical professionals that spent more time learning about the cholera epidemic can give us more insights about exactly what happened. But it was a terrible pandemic. It was a rampant disease. And in fact, it's a lot of the shilas we're dealing with now were dealt with during that pandemic. So Rav Schechter and Rav Asher Weiss as well, they make a point of saying that there was an episode that happened during that period that I have to tell you about. It's just an unbelievable episode that happened during that time, during one of the cholera epidemics. And they both pointed out that this story I'm about to tell you, we cannot use this as a model and just make a straight parallel to the current corona pandemic. But before we get to there, let me just tell you a little bit about what happened. So Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, who was the father, the grandfather, the patriarch of the Musar movement, he started a movement in Klal Yisrael that we have a focus of learning Torah, of doing mitzvos, of doing chasadim, doing beautiful things for one another. This is what Jews do. But he said that it's kind of like we're going through motions and we aren't taking the opportunity to see, number one, whether or not these mitzvahs are actually having an effect on our personalities, how we are as people, how we are as a character in the world. Are we a benefit to the Jewish people? Are we a benefit to ourselves, to our family? How am I developing? These types of questions, while we, of course, they are discussed in our literature before Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter took these ideas of the importance of self-growth and self-improvement and self-help and created a system and a methodical approach to how one can use the mitzvos in order to better themselves, how one can use the learning that they do in order to better themselves, how one can use the chesed that they do in order to improve on their character traits. And this is what Rabbi Yisrael Salanter did in a methodical way. And he created a whole movement of yeshivas that would encourage their talmidim to attach themselves to this methodology in order to reach greater heights. But aside for being this person who was a leader in the Musar movement and a founder in the Musar movement, but he also was an Eloi. He was a genius. He was an unbelievable Talmid Chacham. And one Yom Kippur, during one of the cholera pandemics, when the virus or the disease, whatever exactly it was, started up, resurfaced. So there was a major concern, and at least the doctors at the time were telling him and others that things similar to what we're doing now, which basically you have to keep distance from people. It's all quoted in Shulchan Aruch, in the Mishnah Berurah. I mean, not Shulchan Aruch. This is after the Shulchan Aruch. The Mishnah Berurah quotes all this. The Mishnah Berurah actually quotes in the Bir Halacha. He says that one should make sure to keep a mask on during a cholera pandemic. He says you should cover your nose and your mouth, not just your mouth, also your nose. Things like keeping distance from one another. These are things, the basic things that we do. Good hygiene were all discussed in the poskim regarding the cholera pandemic. But Rabbi Saul Salanter, during a Yom Kippur, it was the night of Yom Kippur during a cholera pandemic, he stood up at the bima, and he at the bima said that that one should be encouraged. This is the way they bring down the story in a few different places. There's actually a few different versions of the story. Probably the most common version of the story is that he stood up and said, everyone should go home tonight and go make kiddush. Go make kiddush and eat something. This is on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, he gets up and he says, I'd like for everyone to go home and go make kiddush and eat something. Because the concern was, and what the doctors were telling him, is that if people were to fast and then, God forbid, contract the cholera disease, that would be very harmful. And therefore, one should make sure not to fast and should go home and eat. So he stood up on Yom Kippur and said, everyone, this would be Saul Salanter. He had Yireh Shamayim, like a historic Yireh Shamayim. They tell stories about Rabbi Saul Salanter. I'm sure some of them are just legends, but that he wouldn't give a shiur, he wouldn't give a Torah class if in the podium he was in, above him was a chandelier, because maybe he would misrepresent the Torah in even just the slightest way, that God would break the chandelier and drop it on his head at that moment. Like, it doesn't apply to me and you. I get that, and whether or not that actually is what he did is really beside the point. We're talking about someone who had a high, historic, all-star level Yireh Shamayim, and he gets up on Yom Kippur morning and says everyone should go home, make kiddush, and eat something. There's actually a more extreme version of the story that's brought down by the Sridei Eish, Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, who was also a major posek and a student of the Musar movement in Europe, and then later in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, Rav Baruch Epstein, who was the author of the Torah Tamima, the son of the Aruch HaShulchan. Remember Rav Baruch Epstein? I think we mentioned him in the past, where Rav Baruch Epstein was not actually a formal pulpit rabbi. He was a banker or an accountant or something. He crunched numbers, and he had just a regular profession. He wasn't a rav or anything, but he was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. Living by the dictum of the halachta b'drachav, of walking in God's path, but also derech eretz kadma l'Torah, that you have to make sure that you know how to be a citizen of the world, and not just with your face inside of a Gemara 24/7. You have to be able to take care of your family. You have to be able to put food on the table, etc. So we're talking about huge people, and they all and Chassam Sofer also all have the story of Rabbi Saul Salanter, where not that he stood up and said go home and make kiddush, but at the podium he stood there with a cup of wine and some mizonos and actually made kiddush, and on Yom Kippur, due to the cholera pandemic, in order so that people would not become weak. So Rav Shechter, this is a video clip from a recent shiur that Rabbi Shechter gave, discussing some of these shilas that I was zocheh to be at. So listen to the way, first of all, how he brings down the story and his perspective on applying the story to today.
Yeah, there's a famous story that there was a cholera epidemic.
Can you hear it well? No? Okay, so give me 1 second. I didn't think so. Give me 1 second.
We can't see it either. Can you share that screen?
Yes. What screen were you looking at?
Your daughter.
Oh! Okay,
Great,
now you see.
beautiful picture.
Okay. Oh, well, I thought you were talking about Rosh. I heard someone say it's a beautiful picture. I thought you were talking about Rosh Hashanah.
No, you're
I was like, yeah, I think so too. 1 second. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that is a cute picture. Okay, here we go. This should be. You see Rav Shefter? Do you see Rabbi Shefter now? Hold on.
No.
What about now?
Yes.
Okay, but I don't see any of you folks.
That's okay.
Oh yeah, Zoom.
He's got more stuff on the screen than I have.
Yeah, here we go.
Okay, you see Rav Shefter?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just rewind it 1 second.
Because the piyut itself constitutes the Dovish Bigdush. Yeah, there's a famous story that there was a cholera epidemic years ago. Rabbi Salanta got up in Vilna and he made Kiddush from the bima and encouraged everyone to eat. They say it's not exactly, that's the way it was written up in the newspapers, but that's not it. The Rashash was there. Rashash was there. He was very young at the time. So the people who were there say that's not exactly what happened. He announced that. So
when Rabbi Salanta got up and told everyone to go eat, so Rav Shefter pointed out that the Rashash was also a businessman. He actually was a very, very successful businessman. I think his business was in furs. And he was actually one of the major funders behind the Vilna Shas. The Vilna Shas is, the standard edition of Shas, and in the Vilna Shas, you'll see that in the back of the Vilna Shas, so you have, it just happens to be sitting here. You have the chidushim of Hagos v'chidushe harashash, Rav Shmuel Strashon. So he was a businessman in Vilna. And one of the major funders behind that put the funding behind the Vilna Shas to be published. But when they were publishing it, he said, by the way, I happen to have, some Divrei Torah on the Gemaras. And he gave them his manuscripts to include in the publication of the Vilna Shas. So obviously they're not going to say no to a donor. But it was very much to their benefit. The chidushim of the Rashash, first of all, there's not a single daf in Shas that the Rashash doesn't have a comment on. Not a single daf in Shas. All 2,711 daf in Shas, the Rashash has something to say about it. And the Rashash, his chidushim, are amazing. They've been accepted as kind of like the standard approach to how to interpret Rashi or Tosfos on a page of a Gemara. That if the Rashash has a comment on how to interpret a Rashi or a Tosfos, usually it's become now the standard approach of how to interpret that Rashi or Tosfos in light of the Rashash, as opposed to others that may have came before him. The Rashash was unbelievable. So the Rashash, Rav Shefter says, was actually there when Rabbi Salanta got up to make this plea to everyone.
That if a person is weakened, then he'll be more susceptible to catch the sickness, the cholera sickness. So those who didn't feel well, he encouraged them they should eat pachas b'kashir. And the Dayanim
that the Rashash said that basically what Rabbi Salanta said is not that you go and eat completely, don't, but you should eat just enough to keep you healthy. That's what he told them.
Set aside pachas b'kashir. So look, I don't know. I feel healthy. Well, we are. I don't see anybody who has who has this corona disease. So I don't think I have a heter to eat, to strengthen myself. The Mishnah Berurah in Hilchos Tisha B'Av quotes, when you have, when there's a cholera epidemic and there are people around you who have cholera and you're afraid that you're going to catch it, so he says, when you walk in the street, you should wear a mask. It's in the Mishnah Berurah. Tav Kuf Nun Dalet, one of the Rabbanim showed it to me. And then he says, and if you're afraid that your system will not be strong enough to withstand the sickness, so you should eat. You should try to eat pachas mikashir. He says the shear, he thinks the shear for Tisha B'Av is like for Yom Kippur, because it's a tonus.
So Rav Schechter, at the end of the day, he feels as though, even though that was the way the Rabbi Shal Salam to Paskin and the Chassam Sofer Paskin, and you have the Sridei Eish, Rabbi Chili Yaakov Weinberg, and Rav Baruch Epstein, all saying that Rabbi Shal Salam said, that if eating is going to keep you stronger, so that way the sickness won't damage you further, so then you should go and eat even now. But Rav Schechter feels as though that it's very hard to give that kind of like a blanket heter like that, and then it really just becomes subjective. And that if subjectively you feel as though, let's say, fasting, regardless is very difficult for you, and you're nervous that, if I fast, and usually I kind of tough it out, and it, even though it's very, very hard, I kind of just will lie in bed. But the concern is that now I'm also concerned that I'm going to get sick with a corona virus, and if I'm already in a weakened state, then I'm just extremely nervous that it's gonna make it worse. Okay, so that's a different story. But just to give a kind of like a blanket heter like that, Rav Schechter did not agree with. This is the same approach, by the way, of Rav Usher Weiss. Rav Usher Weiss agrees wholeheartedly with Rav Schechter on this point, saying that you can't give a blanket heter like that. There is a very interesting discussion, though, about once one is permitted to eat during a fast day. Let's say that someone has a legitimate reason to eat during a fast day, which, by the way, during this period, there could be a lot more people that have a legitimate excuse to eat. That if, like, let's say someone would approach me and say, listen, I'm a terrible faster. I already have this, underlying condition that has nothing to do with the fast, but it's just, I don't want to now have to deal with the fast and my underlying condition with being faced with the fact that I might contract corona. So I would tell them that, okay, so then you should go and eat. Like you definitely should not fast. But the average person, there's nothing, so you should go eat. But let's say the person really does have a legitimate excuse to eat. So the Shulchan Aruch does say, the Shulchan Aruch says, Chole shehu tzarech le'echol, that let's say a person needs to eat on a fast, ein tzarech omed, that a person does not need to evaluate, meaning they do not need to go through an evaluation with a doctor, how much one is allowed to eat, how much food does this person need in order to survive, right? On Yom Kippur, we would do such a thing. On Yom Kippur, we would, really try and limit it to basically what a person needs in order to, that the fast would not be damaging to the person from a medical perspective. But during the other fast days, that the Shulchan Aruch says, just black on white, he says that a chole shu tzarech le'echol ein tzarech omed. You don't need to go through that kind of an evaluation. Ela ma'achilon oto miyad. Rather, they can eat right away. Because the rabbis and all the rest of the fast that we observe are all rabbinic. The rabbis never made their enactment of these fast days if it's going to be damaging to a person's health. The question is, though, that when the Shulchan Aruch says that, okay, you don't have to fast, and he says, and you don't even need to evaluate and calculate exactly how much food I need, but how far do we take that? Like, do we say that, okay, it's as if, it's not, Shvasar Batamas, but it is, just, a regular day in Tammuz that, or it's a regular day in July that, just like I didn't fast yesterday and I'm not going to fast tomorrow, that today is just another day that I'm not fasting like every other day except for 5 other days of the year. Like, do we treat it as completely, this is just like not a fast day at all, as if the fast never existed? Or we say, no. It's still a fast day. Don't think it's not a fast day. Today is a fast day. You just have the leniency of being able to eat, or maybe you can even say you have a mitzvah to eat because you have an opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of ushmartem lenafshosechem pentishkach masher enecha bechorev, that we have an obligation to protect ourselves, to protect our lives, and therefore you have a mitzvah in front of you to eat in order so that you could feel well and it's not going to be damaging to your health. But today is still Shvasar B'Tammuz. Like, don't think that today is just not a fast. There's a fast, but every time you put something in your mouth, it's being done because you have a leniency, you're allowed to. So this touches on 2 principles in halacha. That in halacha, when something gets pushed aside, like let's say Shabbos, for example, someone needs to break Shabbos to go to the hospital, or a doctor needs to be able to fill an order in the hospital, and the only way that they can do that is by violating Shabbos. Okay, so when that happens, do we treat it as a dechuya, which is simply that it pushes it aside, but to make room for something else, but the two exist, coincided one with the other, that I have a mitzvah to save someone's life because I, qualified to do that. And therefore I can break Shabbos in order to do that, but it's still Shabbos? Or do we say, no, it's like a Tuesday, and I don't even have to think about Shabbos. So with regard to a fast day as well, there's a discussion in the poskim that once a person has a leniency to eat, does it completely get rid of the fast day as if it never existed? So according to the Brisker Rav felt as though that once someone is allowed to eat, so then that means they are allowed to eat completely. I mean, that is the straight reading in Shulchan Aruch. Ein tzarich omed. You don't need to do any sort of an evaluation. You machil l'tom miyad. You just eat. It's as if there was never a fast for you. You eat. It's a day of tshuva. It's a day of davening. It is not a day of fasting. And it never was a day of fasting for such a person. That's the approach of the Brisker Rav. Most other poskim disagree. Most other poskim, the Divrei Nehemiah, was written by a Chabad chassid in the 18th century, a very close student of the Tzemach Tzedek. He feels as though absolutely not. This is not a complete hutra. This is not as if the fast never existed. This is the opinion of the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer says that the fast still exists, and you should eat, whatever you feel is necessary for you to eat. You don't need to go to a doctor. You don't need to be put on a specialized diet for the day, but you still should be very mindful of the things that you put in your mouth. It's not that, it's a day of only teshuvah and tefillah, but it, even for you, is also a fast day, but a fast day that you have a leniency to eat on. But according to the Brisker Rav, no, it's not even a fast day. So you have to hear this story of the Brisker Rav, that someone came to the Brisker Rav and told them, whatever medical condition, whatever it might be, and the Brisker Rav paskined, okay, so then I would recommend that. He didn't say I would recommend. He said, okay, so then you should not fast on the fast day. Right? There's no mitzvah for you to fast on the fast day. Let's say Shvas Arbatamos. Let's say like the person I was describing before. They come to me and they say, listen, I have an underlying condition. I'm nervous about corona. Is it really a good idea for me to fast? So I would tell them, certainly no. You should not. You should not feel obligated to fast at all. And maybe it'd be a good idea for you to not fast, and maybe just speak to your doctor, and whether or not your doctor agrees, okay, fine. But the Brisker Rav tells this person, okay, don't fast, which we just learned from the Brisker Rav means it's as if the fast doesn't exist. okay? But then the person came back to the brisker Rav and said, you know what? Even though my doctor is telling me that, better that you don't fast, and I myself, I feel too uncomfortable not fasting. I would like to fast. So the brisker Rav said to them, he said, okay, so then just make sure that the day before the fast by mincha, so if you take a look in the siddur, every fast day, in the siddur by mincha, there's a paragraph at the end of your Shemona Esrei for someone who wants to accept upon themselves a personal fast day. There are two types of fasts. There are communal fast days, and there are also personal fasts that a person can take upon themselves. For whatever reason it might be. The Gemara discusses, like, if someone has a bad dream, it's quoted in Shulchan Aruch. So there are certain types of bad dreams that one would want to fast for. And the Mishnah Berurah actually says that it's very specific, the types of bad dreams. Like if someone, God forbid, had a dream of like a Sefer Torah, God forbid, was burning, right? Something like a really, really horrific situation that you had a dream about, and you're shook to the core about it. So a person would have can take upon themselves a fast to kind of ease themselves as a form of tshuva. Okay, fine. So a person always has the right to take upon themselves a fast, but it needs to come with a Kabbalah. It needs to come with an acceptance of the fast. You need to make a declaration that tomorrow I am fasting. For the communal fast days, it's not necessary. Some folks can say that it is, but generally speaking, we don't have that custom. For the communal fast days, you're part of the community, and since the community is fasting, so you're fasting also. But when it comes to a personal fast day, there you need to make a verbal commitment to fast. So says the brisker Rav to this person, he says, okay, fine. If you'd like to fast, let's say it was Shvas Arba Tammuz, I think it was actually Tisha B'Av. If you'd like to fast Tisha B'Av, so then just make sure by Mincha the day before that you do a Kabbalas Tainus. Well, why do I have to do a Kabbalas Tainus? Why don't you accept the fast? I'm part of the tzibur. He says, no, you're not. You are not supposed to fast on Tisha B'Av. You're not supposed to fast on the day of the communal fast day. So any fast you're going to do tomorrow is completely personal. And therefore, we need to come with a personal declaration. Like, isn't that, it's so sharp of the brisker Rav. It's like laser pointed. How he knows the halacha so well. It's almost like he didn't lose a beat. Like, okay, fine. So you're not obligated to fast on Tisha B'Av. So then therefore, you would be considered like an individual that wants to fast on a regular day. And therefore, you have to accept upon yourself a personal fast day. It'd be interesting. I would assume that the brisker would say that such a person probably would not be able to be considered as part of the minyan for Anenu. Like by Mincha, we have to make sure that we have a minyan in order for the Shliach Tzibor to say Anenu, the special tefillah of a communal fast day. Or let's say like laning. There's a whole tshuva from Rav Yosef in the Chavadas about whether or not you can lane by Yechal, the special laning for a fast day, when you don't have a tzibor that is fasting. If there's only a few individuals that are fasting. So I would imagine that he would probably say that individual is probably not considered part of the minyan for something like that. I want to just move on in the minutes we have remaining to two other very brief shilas, very brief great decisions that were made by Rav Shechter and other poskim during this period leading up to Shvasar B'Tammuz. So we know that we are having our minyanim outside, it's because we're still holding off going indoors right now because unfortunately in California numbers are still going up, and it's just not the time to move indoors to something that could potentially be more risky. What the risk is, I don't really know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a infectious disease specialist. But if we were supposed to be outside until this point, now is not necessarily the right time to move indoors and put people in a confined space space together. So we're still davening outside, and it seems like, there are many shuls just like us throughout the country, even in New York, where things are really much better. The numbers are consistently going down in New York, unlike California that are going up. But even in New York, minyanim, are still taking place outdoors. So the question is that, it's extremely hot outside. It could be potentially, and if it gets hot, so then a person, God forbid, could become dehydrated. And during a fast day, dehydration is one of the classic symptoms, or the symptoms of dehydration is one of the classic ingredients to someone breaking their fast. That would be very dangerous if someone became dehydrated while they're fasting. So if someone feels a dehydration coming on, so then you should break your fast. So the shaila was, well, I want to be able to go daven with a minyan. So if I'm going to go daven with a minyan, so I could potentially become dehydrated sitting out in the sun. What should I do? So Rav Shechter paskin like this. He said, "Biyom hey le sidra pinchas haba." That on the upcoming Thursday, so tomorrow, imadayin lo yibna beis hamikdash. If the beis hamikdash is not yet rebuilt, it's kaim hatanis, and the fast day needs to take place. V'yosha megifa adayin nimtzas etzleinu, and the magefa, the horrible pandemic, is still in our midst. Just to point out, by the way, Rav Shechter's Emunah. When was this tshuva written? Tes Vav Tammuz. This was written yesterday. And yesterday, Rav Shechter's Emunah is strong enough to say that, number one, and he really means it, that if, the Beis HaMikdash is not yet rebuilt, and V'hayosha megefa adayim nintzas esleinu, and if the pandemic is still rampant, but because it's possible that we know that Yeshuas Hashem keheref ayin, that God could, solve anything in an instant. So it is possible that this thing will just be gone by the end of this class. Harbe choshishim, that there are many that are nervous, l'spal b'fnim b'beis hakneses, that we're still nervous to go inside. V'adifim l'spal b'chutz, it's better, according to Ke'etzas Harofim, according to the doctor's advice, it's better to daven outside. Achen, Be'ir New York. In New York, mezeg avir b'derech klal hu cham me'od b'kayetz. In the summer, it can get very hot in New York and very humid. V'hiyosh b'yom hatanis. You Lahoyans can't relate to that. V'hiyosh b'yom hatanis aser lishtos. And we know that on a fast day, one is not allowed to drink. Kayamis esharos lo kol kach rechoka shel hisyashvus, that someone could become dehydration. Someone could experience dehydration, says Rav Shechter. V'av shebevadei mala gedola hi l'spal b'tzivor, and Rav Shechter says, and even though it's a beautiful and a gavaltika thing to daven in a tzibor, to daven with a minyan, but God forbid a person should not put themselves at risk of doing such a thing. And if you're going to end up being outside and it's going to be in the sweltering heat that could potentially cause dehydration, better you stay home in air conditioning, daven and benachas, and keep the fast. It's better that you stay at home and daven alone than go to minyan and potentially that risking you having to break your fast. Better that you take care of yourself. We know that human life is number one on God's priority list. Okay, moving on to one more very fascinating shaila that Rav Shechter received. He received the shaila, and I've heard him speak about this a number of times, which is, let's say a person, and he says that especially during this period, it's more prevalent that, we know that the minhag in Klal Yisrael is during the next 3 weeks, we refrain from music, weddings, simchas, shaving. We take on the nihuge avelus, customs of mourning, and the customs of mourning we take on at least until Rosh Chodesh Av are those customs that are done during the 12 months of Avelus, the year of Avelus. Shaving, the Ramah says during the 12 months of Avelus, is something that should be done yigar bo chavero, until your friend kind of says like, "Whoa, you could use a trim," and that is about depends on the person. People that are always clean shave, it's going to happen sooner than for someone who usually has a beard, or definitely someone who doesn't keep their beard kempt, and therefore it's going to vary. But we have taken on as the custom that during the 3 weeks of this period between Shvas Har B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, when we mourn the destruction of both Batei Mikdash, that we do not shave, we don't listen to music and the like. But let's say a person is nervous that we have been cut off from society. People are staying home and trying to take care of their health as best as they can, and it could be very isolating and could, God forbid, become depressing for a person. And the shaila is, well, music kind of lifts my spirits, and if it lifts my spirits, am I allowed to listen to music during the 3 weeks? So take a look at what Rosh Hashanah says. V'nagu shelo lahakshiv lemuzika be yud beis chodesh. That there's the custom is that one does not listen to music during the 12 months of Avelos. V'nira pasha dahainu dafka im tachlis hashkafa hi bichdei lismoach. He says that, well, it's not all music. It's any music that would make you happy, okay? If the music makes you happy, so then that is music that is prohibitive. Al mi shehu b'matzav shel mara shchora v'atzvus. But if a person is in a very deep and dark depression, v'rotza lahakshiv lemuzika b'chtei that a person wants to listen to music in order so that they could release some of that depression from them in order to put themselves in a little bit of a better mood. This is not included in the minhag to not listen to music during the 12-month period of Avelos, and therefore also during the 3 weeks. In Tammuz Tavshin Pei, Shekol Ha'olam Sharui Bitsar Machmas HaMagefa. Being that today we are dealing with the terrible nature of this pandemic, Shepashta B'chol Olam Kulo, that is spread all over the world, V'harbe Shurim B'mara Shchora, that a lot of people are experiencing a depression because of it. Nira Sheyesh Lahago Bazeh, a person can certainly listen to music during this time. Ubeprat be'erev Shabbos, and he says certainly on erev Shabbos, kadei shelo yichnas l'Shabbos shu b'matzav shekazeh. Certainly on erev Shabbos, in order so that you can go into Shabbos in a good mood. So again, this is only speaking to a person that is dealing with this issue. This is not a blanket. This is a heter. This is a subjective heter. That if a person is very anxious and needs to listen to music to calm themselves down, and the pandemic is just making their anxiety worse, or potentially their depression worse, and music can help relieve some of that pain, so then certainly music would be permitted during this time. These are just some of the very, very important and interesting shilas that present itself during this period, during the coronavirus period, specifically related to the 3 weeks. I will end with the same caveat as last time. I hope next week to move on to some very, very interesting, great debates surrounding the Kotel. That is the next series I'd like to go into. Leading up to Tisha B'Av, and then even after Tisha B'Av, I think I want to learn about the Kotel a little bit. There's a lot of fascinating history and halacha surrounding the Kotel that I think as a group we would really enjoy to learn together. However, as these situations come up and as the Piskei Halacha are taking place in real time, it's important for us to spend time learning some of the great debates, focusing on the great decisions and learning the Torah of our great deciders during this period. Okay, we'll stop here. I'm happy to hang around for a couple of minutes before my next chavrusa if anyone has any questions.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, masks would not have helped you during cholera epidemic
Yeah.
at all.
Oh,
What's
tell me
happening
why.
with now is people don't really understand how this virus is being spread. And back then they didn't understand how Vibrio cholera bacteria was spread either. So that's
Wow.
something that's in common. Then it was all
Meaning the
people.
mask is really like a paranoia. You're saying like we'll just throw it on because we just don't know what's going to help.
The research would be easy to do for reasons that I don't understand. It hasn't been done, but for every virus that's spread by an aerosol, it's generally agreed that masks don't do a whole lot. But we can't tell exactly how this virus is spread. Nobody wants to do the animal experiments, et cetera. I don't know what to say.
Wow.
Again,
And then cholera was the same. Cholera was an aerosol.
no, cholera was all fecal, oral, poor sanitation.
Poor sanitation.
Yeah. So wearing a mask wouldn't have helped you at all. They usually people got it from
Water usually.
contaminated water.
Really
Water.
fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But it is amazing to see though when you look at those chuvas that the poskim are kind of just like, I mean, it's the same thing that we've been looking at over the last few weeks. It's kind of like a lot of these things are not necessarily rabbinic decisions. It's more medical decisions, right? And the poskim then were just following the medical advice that they were looking for the top medical advice, but they were getting whatever medical knowledge was available then. Right?
Yeah, my main criticism was that they had no ability to do the research to discover how cholera was spread then, but we have the ability to do it now, but nobody's doing it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Yeah, he's fast.
Yeah, easy, fast, everyone. And if anyone has any specific questions with regard to the fast, please don't hesitate to reach out. Or if you know of anyone that could benefit from calling me to go through some of the shilas, then please pass along my cell to them. Okay.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.